Voice. Now, let's return to the resounding defeat of the Voice. Yes, I like saying that, the resounding defeat of the Voice. We did predict it all along, and we certainly were pleased to see that happen. Race-based division is never a good idea. The electorate of Kennedy in far north Queensland has one of the highest portions of Indigenous voters in the country, 15%. But only 19% of the electorate voted yes to the Voice. Joining us now is Bob Catter, who has been the member for Kennedy since 1993. Great to see you as always, Bob. Now give us your thoughts, Bob, on the lessons of the Voice.
To the absolute shame of my nation, I am so embarrassed by this. But also I have a strong feeling of failure. Dick Smith, no less, and Macca on Sunday went into Mornington Island and gave a very generous donation to get a market garden going. And I hadn't seen this. When the Socialists got elected in Queensland, the much maligned Bajocki-Peterson government went down, there were market gardens in all of the 15 communities where there is 100% First Australian people. These are genuine First Australians living in their homelands. And there's nearly 70,000, 80,000 of them in the Torres Straits and the communities areas. Now, their life expectancy is 56. Now, you don't need a Voice to tell you that. And there's 15 local government councils representing those areas. Why don't you go out and have a yarn to them? Now, I got a television crew to go in, and of course they asked all the questions about the Voice. All the answers were not about the Voice. The answers that came from the blackfellas, not the whitefellas, from the blackfellas was, our problems are affordability. We can't afford to buy food. We most certainly can't afford to buy fresh food. We've got no housing. We've got no jobs. Well, why haven't they got jobs? Because you took away their water rights, their timber rights, their quarrying rights, their rights to run cattle. You took all those rights away from them. And then you say, oh, look, they're lazy no-hopers. Well, I tell you what, if you took all those rights away from the Wokies in Sydney, I know what they'd look like. Now, that is the shame of this nation. That is the shame of this nation. And Jason Ned, who was to get an Australian Icon Award off the Prime Minister because he had mustered more cattle than any other person in human history. More than anyone in America, Argentina, Brazil, more than anyone else. And he was to get an Australian Icon Award, and he died 2 weeks before the award. This is about a month ago. Now, Jason got 1,000 head of cattle together, just wild cattle. He had to get up before daybreak, go to bed after sundown, risk his life on a galloping horse to get those cattle together, wild cattle together. And he got 1,000. It's $1.5 million he's done for his family and his country. But he couldn't get a land title. I mean, you know, you're out there screaming for the Voice. Why don't you listen to the Voice that's there now? The Voice 100%. Is there now, but you won't listen to it. And the hypocrisy of running out the likes of Alan Joyce and Mike Henry supporting your cause. Well, if there was one sure way, you Wokies, you Mr ALP, you Mr LNP Bleeding Hearts, if there's one sure way to lose that vote, was to run out Alan Joyce and Mike Henry. And that shows how far you're out of touch with the Australian people.
Well,
that shows just how far you're out of touch. In the last election, the ALP couldn't get 33% of the vote. The Liberals couldn't get a third of the vote. And they voted for all sorts of crazy people like me. You know, they voted for all sorts of crazy people.
Well, Bob,
but they won't vote for the majors.
Rita.
In Kennedy, which is as far removed as you can get from inner city Melbourne and Sydney, how did the general population there view this entire divisive debate? I mean, we were well and truly sick of it here, but what was the perception of it in a seat like Kennedy?
I would say during that period, I interfaced with maybe 400 people. And I would say 300 of them expressed an opinion about something. and I would say 300 expressed an opinion about this. Now, this custodian business, you know, when you land in a Qantas aircraft, Mr. Joyce, the great Australian, except he's not an Australian, and Henry's this word, head of BHP. Both companies are owned by Australians. Both companies sold by the ALP, LNP junta that runs Australia, and they got a foreigner running. Well, naturally, a foreigner owns it. But you know, the custodian business, no one worried about that much. But when the Voice came along, they said, well, hold on, if they're custodians of my land, you know, one lady in front, speaking in the Parliament in front of me, she said, I believe they still own the land. And I said, good, could I have your address, please, of your house? And she said, what are you talking about? Well, you said we own the land. I got to claim to have a bit of blackfell in the family tree, and I'd be pretty keen to get hold of your house. You said we own it. Well, you hand it over to me. Well, unless you're lying hypocrite. And the speaker pulled me up. No. I mean, she said that we own it. Well, I'm coming in to take possession. Unless you're, of course, a lying hypocrite, are you?
James.
She's white as a sheet and ran out of the Parliament, you know. But you know, I've got to live with the fact that my people, my brother cousins, have a life expectancy of 56, where the rest of the country has life expectancy 82. Let me go back to Jason Ned. I tried desperately for 4.5 years to get him a pastoral lease because he's mustered the cattle on somebody else's land. And
Sure.
I told him this. I said, you got a flawed title, Jason. I love you got a flawed title. No one else got a better title because no one's got any idea who owns Sturmagee. We don't know whether the tribes own it or whether the government owns it or whether the people who live there own it or whether the council owns it. No one's got any idea who owns the land, and nor is there any movement to get... So I tried to get him pastoral lease. Now, get a handle on this. This is the Wokie mob pushing the Voice, right? Would you please give him a pastoral lease? Every Australian can get a pastoral lease. A black fella living on his own land where he's lived for 30,000 years or whatever, he can't get a pastoral lease. What sort of, you know,
but I mean, Bob, doesn't this...
drink, black fellas are not. White fellas allowed to get a pastoral lease, black fellas are not. And then you want a voice. Well, why
Bob,
don't you listen to the voice that's out there?
Doesn't this you know, really comes back to what you were saying at the start of this whole thing? I mean, the fact that the way land and property has been dealt with post-Mabo has been all about collective ownership, so Aboriginal people don't have the same ability in these communities to own property in the same way that everybody else does, capitalize on that property, start businesses, invest, be part of the economy. Isn't that the real voice that's needed, that voice to the economy, not the voice to Parliament?
Well, I just, look, you know, I was the minister that set up self-management. It's sort of like a government within a government in these little communities. They're too far away from Brisbane or Canberra to have any reality government. So I decided to give them their own government, you know, and that's been watered down to all hell now. But all the same, there still is a local government council there. I think there are 15 in Queensland. Well, why wouldn't you listen to them? And they will tell you, when the camera went out, this is a few weeks before the vote, and naturally the interviewer asked all the questions about the Voice. And each of the mayors, they didn't answer the question about the Voice. They said, well, our problem here is affordability. You know, like we can't afford to buy food. By the time it gets up here, it's sort of overripe and it's so expensive we can't afford to buy food. And the bloke goes back to asking the question about the Voice.
Yeah,
you know
100%, I mean? Bob, 100%.
Can't you see that the Wokies are interested in their moral image for the world? They're not the slightest bit interested in the people.
There you go.
Slightest bit interested in the people.
100%. Bob Catter, always great to catch up with you and hear what life is like in the real world.